newspapers are seeing, hey, all of a sudden there used to be a 6% fee that for sure was going to happen. If now at least half of that is going to go into dispute, are we just cutting 3% off the top of real estate? Are we cutting 6% off the top of real estate? Are real estate prices going to go down? What do you think when you hear that?
I'll share. That's what's going on in my mind. I'm thinking macro, then I'm thinking what sellers are thinking, and then I'm thinking what buyers are thinking, and then I'll share what my thoughts are as far as home prices going down or not. Let's first just be real specific about what is changing. There's two major things that are changing as a result of this lawsuit and this settlement. One is that listings no longer will reflect what the buyer commission is on that listing. Agents went out of their way to explain in contracts what the commission was being paid as far as the buyer's agent, and then they saw it on all of the home purchase and sale agreements and things of that nature. But the negotiating process wasn't really informed for the buyer. And so because a lot of that was done on the multiple listing service, where the seller's listing would just show what that cooperative agreement, what that shared commission structure would be with the buyer. And generally it was either 2.5% or 3% going to the buyer side. So what's changing here is you're no longer going to see that buyer's commission listed on the listing in the multiple listing service. That doesn't mean that buyers and sellers agents still can't have a cooperative listing agreement. It just means that they are going to do it outside of the multiple listing service. And there's no problem with doing that outside of the multiple listing service. It's just not, they're getting away from sort of that standard, always done practice, and they're increasing transparency and the ability for buyers to negotiate what those commissions are that they're doing. So number one, you're no longer going to see buyers agent commissions on the multiple listing service. Number two, all agents are going to need to have a buyer's agreement signed before a buyer's agent shows a home to a potential buyer. This is new, and this is not the way that it was required before, but now agents, buyer's agents, are going to have to come to terms and agree on the rate for their services and have that agreement signed before they show homes to buyers. So those are the two things that are changing. However, this does not preclude a certain amount of commissions from being paid. It is all about moving towards that transparency. So,
all right. So you just said a lot there, right?
Okay.
So in what can get lost when you throw the baby out with the bathwater is not this idea that commissions are going away.
Correct.
It's just that commissions are going from this just understood, this is what's happening. There's really no alternative from the market's feeling.
Right.
To, hey, front and center, we need to have a conversation for you to agree upon this before this actually happens.
Yes.
And therefore, there's an opportunity for that to change, right?
And industry expectations are that and the purpose behind this is when there's more transparency and more ability to negotiate those rates, that buyer's agent commissions likely will compress. They will likely come down over time. We're hearing estimates somewhere between 20 to 50% reduction in fees because of this. That is the intent of this lawsuit, is to drop those commissions because that helps home owners, that helps home buyers, that creates more home price affordability. Those are all the major things that people are going for here.
Got it. So what I'm hearing from you is, first of all, let's not all rush to assume that it's going to be one haircut off the top of fees going away, which you can get lost in the sauce if you're just reading headlines or whatever.
So on the question of home prices and the articles that I read, and I read a number of them, and in talking with folks and listening to podcasts on this, there are some takes out here that all of a sudden people are saying, wow, home prices are going to drop 3% in July when this thing takes effect.
Yeah.
And that's just not real. So what's happening is this is not a coordinated event. This is not like in July when this thing happens. All of a sudden, every real estate agent and every buyer and seller all of a sudden say, well, you know what? We used to pay 6% for these services. Now we're going to pay 3%. That's not happening. That's not going to happen. There are millions of buyers and sellers and real estate agents out there who are all negotiating and navigating these changes over the course of months and probably years. So in order for this to have a dramatic effect on the market, the most dramatic effect would happen if you just pushed a button and all of a sudden this took place. This is not that way. In fact, right now, it's very common for buyer's agent agreements to be signed at that 3% rate right now.
Yep.
Over time, it's likely that those rates will come down through general marketplace dynamics. Yeah, competitive marketplace. Yeah. but it's not right now. So if we're thinking about a potential decline on prices, number one, just realize that this is going to take a long time for people to figure it out, how to navigate this, and a very long time to kind of standardize within the marketplace.
Yeah, and if we just think about behavior, if we have operated a certain way for 100 years, it's not going to just overnight flip a switch and all of a sudden everybody knows how to operate. I think it stands to bear that we're going to start with where we've always been. And then from there, we're going to like take like little iterations until we find a new normal. It's not going to be overnight, which means that while we do foresee a change in the way that real estate is transacted and how that change will affect how deals get done, and then eventually it's going to trickle into like overall pricing, it's not going to happen overnight, which means that we need to open the aperture to the idea that like there is no, real estate never happens in a vacuum. Real estate is a complex transaction with a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of macroeconomic forces, and A minus B isn't going to equal a new normal. It's just going to be like A minus B plus all this other like cocktail of stuff that happens, which is the reason why we like to bring perspective into discussions whenever anything is happening and people think that like one thing causes another and it's like a complete reflection, right?
Exactly. You remember when we were doing the Jacksonville real estate market update just last week, and I was sharing how we are undersupplied in the Jacksonville real estate market.
Yeah.
And I started to receive some questions on like, well, if months of inventory is 5, does this mean that home prices are going to go up? Or if months of inventory is 6 or 7, does this mean that real estate prices are going to go down or be flat? And what I was very quick to caution everybody is I'm sharing with you one of the major impactful indicators of what pricing is going to be over the next 6 to 12 months. But we need to have respect for what we're talking about here. We're talking about the real estate market. We're talking about prices, which are dependent on supply, demand, interest rates, what the Fed's doing, inflation,
construction pricing, materials,
what's going on across the world where, you know, things are, so it is a
employment, the economy.
There you go, right? And then potential lawsuits that the NAR might have that could potentially affect commissions on real estate agents too. So how big of a lever is this on pricing?
Perfect.
In comparison to the other.
Thank you for landing us there. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. So talk to me about that. I know you got real thoughts about that.
Yeah, so the first thing that we should realize when it comes to this effect on home prices is that home prices are a factor of supply and demand. So again, to reference what we were talking about on the Jacksonville real estate market update, if you were listening to that show, you'll know that we are undersupplied when it comes to housing. And that is a challenge for our economy and for people living in our country and for people in Jacksonville. It is a good thing for you as an owner of the asset. That's why I talk so much about this is a great time to own assets, because you're in a position of strength because you own where there's not something that there's not a whole lot of in comparison to how much people want to buy. So right now we are undersupplied. No matter what happens with this NAR settlement, we are drastically undersupplied. John Burns Consulting released data showing that we are 2 million housing units undersupplied currently. And last year in 2023, you would have thought that's the best year that we could have started to take a chunk out of this supply issue. And last year, we undersupplied the marketplace by 300,000 housing units. We only built 1.5 million and we had 1.8 household formations. So we're not even decreasing that undersupply. Where the problem is getting worse. And what you should realize is this undersupply is the reason that housing prices actually increased in 2023 in Jacksonville and in many other parts of the country. And we're able to withstand almost 8% interest rates. And that problem is not going to be fixed anytime soon. So the biggest lever to pull here, or the biggest thing to understand as far as what pricing is going to be affected, is we are still in an undersupplied market. And that is going to be a large factor, and it's going to be here for a while. It's not going to change in a while. So that's the first thing I think from a macro perspective. No, I don't think housing prices going down because of that factor.
Love it. Love it. So to recap of why we're talking about this right now, this lawsuit came down. It's going to change real estate transactions. And there's a lot of conversation around the effect on the realtor and the effect on the home buyer and the home seller on this show, we talk about things from an investor perspective, right? So when we think about what's happening, we're going to get into the transaction and how this affects the realtor because it's part of the equation. But when we are thinking about the effect of forces on the economy, on real estate, we know that as real estate investors in rental property investing, our biggest lever, the thing that brings the most wealth, is home price appreciation over time. So we are first talking about the effect on the pricing of real estate and whether or not the value of real estate is going to go up or down. And what you are saying is that the transactional effect of a change in what commissions happen during a transaction is one thing that could affect home prices, but we historically know that the biggest thing that affects home prices is supply and demand, followed quickly, and something that really, really affects demand is interest rate.
Yes.
And we just took a haymaker to the face on interest rates, and that did not bring down pricing of real estate because the supply out there does not come anywhere close to matching the demand. And based on trends that are happening, we still haven't come anywhere close to catching up with the new demand that happened last year with replacing that. And therefore, the fact that prices would go down because of a fixed to like the transactional cost of real estate in lieu of a historic rise in interest rates not affecting pricing is unlikely to happen in the immediate future.
I think you said that really well. Put yourself back in the shoes of in early 2022 before interest rates went up and say to yourself, which do you think would have a larger effect on potentially lowering housing prices, rates going up from 3% to 8%, or potentially
how you negotiate
real estate commissions coming down 1 to maybe 3%?
Yeah.
We all would have said, wow, I would think that interest rates going up from 3% to 8% would have a much bigger impact on potentially housing market declines and price declines happening. But guess what? It went up from 3% to 8%, and housing prices still went up. So it reflects how important this undersupply of housing is as the number one lever that's going to affect housing prices.
That's a really good take, GC. So, when we were researching this article, every article led with home prices potentially will drop because of this. Now we can put a little cold water on that and say, hey, you did also say that when the Fed started raising interest rates, and you led with that when the Fed started raising interest rates. And at the end of the day, we have not seen a drop in home prices during interest rates. We do not believe that there's an immediate future where home prices drop because of this.
That's right.
Right, from a macroeconomic perspective.
The last time that you said that foreclosure filings were going to cause a drop in housing prices, the last time that you said that interest rates were going to crater housing prices, the last time that you said that housing prices already went up too much and that was going to crater housing prices, I think you tack this onto that list of those things that we'll be talking about in a year from now, saying, oh yeah, that never happened.
Got it. So from a macroeconomic perspective, as an investor concerned in like the appreciation of my asset, we feel pretty safe, right? So now let's talk we just said that the reason why is because from the seller, there isn't enough supply, right? So like if there was going to be an increase in supply, that would mean more people would want to sell their home, right? So let's talk about the psychology and the dynamics of a real estate sale and how that could be affected by all of this.
Well, so from the seller's perspective, put yourself in the shoes, and maybe some of you are in these shoes, of somebody who's thinking about listing your home. When you go to list your home, you most likely are working with a real estate agent, and that real estate agent prepares a comparable analysis of other properties in the area that recently sold that are comparable to your property. And that's how you determine what the sales price is of your home. And this ruling, it has no bearing on what other homes in that area sold for. So even if we pushed the button and that this all of a sudden just took effect right in one day, which is absolutely not what's going to happen, it's going to take months and years for this to normalize, you still are basing your comparable sale, you're basing the sale of your property on comparable sales. And if you're somebody who wants to maximize the sale potential of your house and you see that something right down the road sold for X price and your price is the same and your house is the same, you're going to try to sell it for that price. So while the net effect here might change, people don't base the decision to sell their asset on the net effect. They base the decision to sell their house on what the sales price is.
What the market commands.
What the market commands.
Right.
Yeah. So this is more reason that I don't see this affecting and dropping housing prices, because that's just not the way sellers go about pricing their asset, or really any person who owns something. You sell it at what the market dictates.
Yeah, got it. So if I was to summarize that again with the scope of what this show is about, right? Like, we care about real estate prices from the perspective of a rental property investor, because that is where we make the majority of our wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And what we are saying is that there is a undersupply to the market and an over demand to the market. And therefore, if that's going to change in any way that's going to stop prices from rising, then more sellers need to come into the market to bring that to equilibrium. And based on the change of what happened with this NAR lawsuit, what is changing is just the commissions that are paid to the openness to negotiation for commissions paid to the agents that are helping out with that sale from a seller's perspective and from a buyer's perspective. And I'm going to bring my home to the market. I'm not going to look around and say, oh, now that the buyer doesn't have to pay a seller a certain amount of commission, I can sell my home for less. Because me as a seller, I'm thinking, oh man, this is what prices are at. That means that I can sell my home and take this much to the bank to go buy another home, to go, put it in another asset class, to like take it off the top and buy myself a nice vacation, whatever. I'm not thinking, oh, because now the buyer doesn't have to pay 3%, I'm going to go discount my home, because there's no incentive for me to do that, because the market is still undersupplied. There are still people at this asking price. And therefore, I'm not incentivized in any way to take anything off the top and sell this thing, because I'm going to be able to sell it to somebody else that's going to pay for that. That money's just going to come to my pocket, not the buyer's agent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Supply and demand is what it comes down to. If
Supply
there's more demand, or the right demand for the amount of supply that you have, why would you take a discount?
Yeah. So that's it from the seller standpoint, right? If we're going to address the supply side, the idea of the supplier discounting the price of the home is pretty far-fetched if you think about just like what's in it for them and what their options are in a market, right?